She hadn't planned to stop. Didn't need bread, didn't need nails, didn't need anything really. Not anymore. But something about the way the wind shifted made her pull the reins, glance toward the square. That's when she saw them. 3 boys, sacks tied over their heads like burlap masks, hands bound behind their backs, standing still beside a hand-painted sign that said, "Orphans, $3 apiece, as is." No names, no ages, just that. Martha Langley stepped down from her wagon, boots striking the dirt like a challenge. No one noticed at first. No one ever did. The town had long since stopped caring where the widow Langley went or why. She did her shopping twice a month, always in black, always silent, never lingering for gossip or prayer meetings. But now she walked straight into the crowd that had formed around the post where the boys stood, and every head turned. Not because she looked strange, but because her eyes did. The auctioneer, a red-faced man with 2 short suspenders, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you here for one?" She didn't answer. One of the boys swayed, the tallest. He was older, maybe 11, maybe 12. His knees buckled slightly, but he caught himself. The other 2 didn't move. $3 each, the man said again, scratching at his neck. Farmer up north said he might take 'em, use 'em for sheep herding. Martha stepped closer, still didn't speak. The auctioneer looked nervous now. "You understand, ma'am, these boys ain't house-trained. Don't talk much. Don't cry either. Haven't eaten today. They've been like that since sunrise. Orders from the cellar. Don't untie the sacks." Still nothing. Could be mute. Could be worse. He chuckled awkwardly. "You don't know what you're buying, is all I'm saying." Martha reached into her coat, pulled out a worn leather purse. Inside were 6 silver dollars and 1 folded scrap of paper that smelled like lavender and dust. She pressed the coins into the man's palm. "All 3, she said. He blinked. "Pardon?" "Untie them." "But now." The crowd watched with breath held and mouths open. The man hesitated, then muttered something under his breath and stepped forward, knife in hand. One by one, he cut the rope binding each sack. The fabric fell away. The oldest boy had pale blue eyes, too wide for his thin face. His jaw was clenched, but he didn't flinch. The middle one had a bruise under one eye and a scab on his lip. His eyes darted between faces, not focusing on any of them. The smallest, just a child, no more than 6, stared straight at Martha. Then he whispered, "Mrs. Langley." Not loud, not scared, just certain. The crowd rustled. Someone coughed. A woman muttered, "How does he know her?" Martha didn't answer. She stepped forward, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, then the middle one, then the eldest. "Come with me," the auctioneer called after her. "You don't even know their names." But she didn't stop. She didn't need their names. She just needed them to live. They rode back in silence. The boys sat in the back of the wagon, clutching their knees, eyes on the road. She didn't ask them questions, didn't hand them bread or water. Not yet. Martha knew better than to offer comfort too quickly. It scared the ones who'd been hurt the worst. Her house sat on the edge of the valley, where the pines grew taller and the creek ran fast. The fields had long since gone to seed. The barn leaned to one side, and the windows hadn't been scrubbed in months. But it stood, and it was hers. The boys didn't move when she stopped in front of the porch. "Inside," she said. The eldest was the first to jump down. He helped the others without a word. They followed her into the house like shadows, steps quiet, breath tighter than it should have been. Inside, the stove still held warmth from the morning. She set a kettle on, opened a cupboard, pulled down a jar of dried beans and a sack of flour. "Sit," she said. They did. She stirred batter with one hand, watched them with the other. "What's your name?" she asked the smallest. He hesitated. "Milo," he whispered. She nodded. "Yours?" The middle one looked down. "Harris." The oldest looked at her a long time before he spoke. "Beck." She set the pan on the stove and began spooning batter into it. "I'm Martha. You said my name, Milo. How'd you know it?" He shrugged. "Just knew." "Did someone tell you about me?" "No." "Did we meet before?" He shook his head. Then how? He looked at her, really looked, like a boy too young to lie but too old to trust the truth. I heard it. When I was sleeping. A lady said it. She said, "Martha Langley will come. She'll take you home." The batter sizzled. Beck stiffened. Harris glanced at the floor. Martha didn't move. "What lady?" "She didn't say her name." Milo scratched at his wrist, voice barely audible. "But she was kind. And warm. Like you." The room was quiet for a long time. Then Beck stood. "I don't care how he knew your name," he said. "But if you're going to hurt us, do it quick. Don't drag it out." Martha turned, brow furrowing. "I won't hurt you. They all say that." "Well," she said, flipping the pancakes, "I won't say it again." She fed them. They ate like wolves. No conversation, no laughter, just the scrape of forks and the clink of mugs. When the plates were empty, she brought out blankets, laid them near the hearth. "You sleep here tonight. Clean clothes are in the chest. If you run, I won't come after you. But I'll leave the lantern on until morning." She turned, stepped toward the stairs. Then she stopped. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we'll talk about what happens next." But they didn't sleep, and neither did she. Because what Milo said replayed in her mind over and over, words she'd never told anyone, not even the Lord. Not even when she was on her knees beside her husband's grave. "Let someone need me again," she'd whispered into the soil. "Let someone say my name." And now a boy had. And 3 lives, maybe 4, were about to change forever. Morning came without ceremony. The clouds held gray over the Langley house, as though the sky itself had stayed up watching. Martha had barely closed her eyes, but the moment the rooster crowed, half-hearted and distant, she was already dressed, already downstairs, already starting the fire again. The boys hadn't moved much. Milo was curled under the blanket nearest the hearth, a thumb pressed gently against his bottom lip, not quite sucking it, just holding it like something to keep the silence company. Harris was lying rigid on his back, hands clenched over his chest like a boy expecting to be dragged out by his collar. Beck sat upright in the farthest corner, knees tucked to his chest, head up, watching the door, watching her. None of them spoke. Martha poured water from the kettle into a basin, rolled up her sleeves, and started mixing soap. She didn't ask who was hungry. She knew they were. Didn't ask who was dirty. That much was obvious too. She didn't crowd them, not yet. But when she set a stack of folded shirts and woolen trousers on the bench beside the stove, her voice was calm and firm. "You can wash in the barn. There's privacy there. Towels are in the red box. Beck, you go first, then Harris. Milo, you're last. Don't come back in until you're clean." None of them moved at first. Beck's jaw tightened. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want to. People don't do things just to be kind." She met his eyes. "That's because people forget how much kindness can cost." He didn't answer. But a minute later he got up, took the clothes, and disappeared through the back door. By the time Harris had followed, Martha was already mixing oats into a pot of boiling water, slicing apples, and adding cinnamon she'd saved for a day she didn't think would come. Milo lingered in the doorway after the other 2 had gone, small shoulders hunched. "Can I keep my name?" he asked. She turned. "Why wouldn't you?" He looked down. "People change them, if they take you in." "I won't." "Good," he whispered, "'cause I think God gave it to me." Something in her chest wavered. "You warm enough?" she asked. He nodded. "Go on, then." He trotted barefoot toward the barn. The sky lightened as they bathed and changed. Beck was the last to return, hair still damp, shirt too big but clean. He didn't sit, just stood at the table like he was waiting for orders. "I'll do chores," he said. "You don't need to. I want to." That changed things. Martha led him outside, showed him the tool shed, the old chicken coop, the vegetable patch that hadn't seen a spade in months. Beck didn't ask questions, just nodded and got to work. She sent Harris to stack firewood. Milo followed her through the house, helping her fold linens and collect dishes. It wasn't a perfect day. There were awkward silences, sudden flinches, Milo dropped a plate when she spoke too sharply about the mud on his boots. Harris wouldn't meet her eyes. Beck didn't come in for lunch. But by the time the sun had dipped past the ridge, there was warmth in the house that hadn't been there in years. And then a knock. 3 short raps. Martha froze. The boys looked up. She opened the door and found Reverend Jacob Stokes standing on her porch. Tall, lean, in a black coat with hands folded like he was praying even when he wasn't. "Afternoon, Martha," he said. "Heard you made a purchase in town." She stepped outside, closed the door behind her. "I brought them home. Wasn't sure it was you. Some of the townsfolk thought you'd gone mad." "Maybe I have. They're not livestock." "I know. They've been passed between more homes than most dogs, Martha. People take them, then bring them back. That one boy, Beck, he broke a man's nose with a horseshoe. He won't be breaking mine." Reverend Stokes looked at her for a long time, then sighed. "You want me to help get their names written with the county clerk? Make it official?" "Not yet. I need to know they'll stay." "I wouldn't count on that, not with their history." She looked past him at the hills, then back. "Then I'll make new history." He smiled faintly. "You always were stubborn. I learned from the best." He tipped his hat, turned to go. "Martha," she looked back, "I hope you know what you're doing. Taking in 1 boy is hard enough. 3? That's a resurrection." She didn't reply. Inside, Milo was peeking from behind the curtain. "Who was that?" "Just someone who worries too much." "He's scared," Milo said, "of what might happen to us." "So am I." That night, she pulled out an old Bible from her trunk, set it on the table. The boys watched. "I read from this when I was your age," she said. "Sometimes it helped, sometimes it didn't. But I thought maybe you'd want to hear something from it tonight." They didn't answer. So she read anyway. "He setteth the solitary in families. He bringeth out those which are bound with chains." She didn't look up, just turned the page and kept going. By the time she closed it, Milo was asleep on the bench, Harris was curled up in a blanket, and Beck, though his eyes were open, wasn't watching the door anymore. He was watching her. She blew out the lantern, and for the first time in years, the silence of the house didn't feel empty. By the way, if this story is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave us a comment telling us which country you're listening from. We love knowing where our listeners are. Now let's continue. The next morning, there was blood in the snow. Not a lot. Just a trail, thin and broken, leading from the back of the house toward the trees. Martha followed it, heart tight in her throat. The boys were still asleep. At least she thought they were. She hadn't woken them. Not yet. Not until she knew. The trail twisted between the trees, barely visible, interrupted by boot prints, too small for a man, too heavy for a fox. She followed it past the fence line, down the ravine, and into the copse where the pines grew thick. And there she found him. Beck. Kneeling beside a snare trap, his hand wrapped in cloth, face blank. A rabbit struggled in the loop beside him, half dead, bleeding from the belly. "I didn't mean to," he said. Martha stepped closer. "I wanted to help, thought I could get breakfast, but it fought me." He didn't cry, didn't wince, just stared at the rabbit, then at her. "Will it die?" "Yes." "I'm sorry." She crouched, gently took the animal, and ended its pain with a rock. Quick, silent. She wrapped it in a cloth and looked at his hand. "You need stitches." "I've had worse." "I'm sure you have, but you won't again. Not here." She cleaned the wound back at the house, stitched it by lamplight while he stared straight ahead. Harris and Milo sat at the table, silent, watching. "I want to learn to trap right," Beck said. "You will. And to shoot." "Why?" "So I can protect them." Martha met his eyes. "All right, but not today." He nodded. When he lay down that night, he didn't curl against the wall. He lay facing the room, facing them. facing her. And Martha, after the boys had drifted off, whispered into the dark, "Thank you." She didn't say who she was thanking. She didn't need to. It was the scream that tore her from sleep, not a startled cry, not a childish whimper, but a raw, animal scream that wrenched through the walls like it had torn itself straight from the spine. Martha bolted upright, heart slamming. It was still dark, maybe an hour before dawn, but there was no mistaking where it had come from. The boys' room. She didn't bother with slippers. Her nightgown tangled around her ankles as she rushed down the hall, nearly colliding with the doorframe. She flung it open. Beck was thrashing. His body was slick with sweat, sheets twisted around his legs, one hand clawing the air like he was reaching for something in a fire. His eyes were shut tight, but his mouth was open wide, the scream still echoing out of him, hoarse now and breaking. Milo was sitting up in the cot beside him, hands over his ears. Harris stood frozen by the window, too afraid to move. "Beck," Martha said sharply, "wake up!" He didn't. His arms jerked. A choked sob rose up. Words, barely, began to form in the cries. "Stop! Please stop! Not again! No more! Please!" Martha didn't hesitate. She crossed the room, dropped to her knees beside him and gripped his shoulders. "Beck, it's not real. You're safe. You're home." His eyes flew open. His whole body snapped rigid as if he'd been doused in cold water. Then he gasped, one huge, rattling breath, and he recoiled so fast he nearly fell from the bed. "Don't touch me!" he shouted. "It's Martha," she said, calmly, not moving. "You were dreaming." He blinked, looked around the room like he didn't recognize it. His chest heaved, sweat rolled down his temples. Milo had started crying softly, a broken sort of sound like someone trying not to cry and failing. Beck covered his face. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake anyone. I didn't mean—" His voice broke. Harris stepped forward, still pale but steady now. "He does this sometimes," he said. "Not always this bad, but sometimes." "Should I go sleep in the barn?" Beck asked. "I'll be quiet. I swear I'll be quiet." "No one's going to the barn," Martha said. "You're staying here." He lowered his hands slowly. "I scared him," he said, nodding toward Milo. Milo wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt and whispered, "It's okay." "I dreamed he was back," Beck said. "The one who bought us before the last place. I don't remember his name, just his boots. He always smelled like rope. I thought I was back there." Martha felt her throat tighten. "You're not." "I know. You're not." He nodded, a little slower this time. They all sat in silence for a while, the only sound the wind outside scratching at the roof. Eventually she spoke. "We'll make tea." "Now?" Harris asked. "It helps," Martha said, rising. "It helps remind us where we really are." They followed her, silent as shadows. In the kitchen, she lit the lantern, boiled water, and let each boy choose his own mug. Milo picked one with blue flowers. Harris chose the plain gray one. Beck didn't choose until she held one out herself. An old tin cup with a dent in the rim. He took it without a word. They sat at the table, sipping slowly. Beck's hands still trembled, but his breathing eased. "Are nightmares like memories?" Milo asked, barely above a whisper. "They're what memories do when you try to forget them too fast," Martha said. That seemed to make sense to all of them, though no one said anything after. They stayed at the table till dawn. None of them returned to sleep. But when the rooster crowed again, it sounded less lonely. Later that morning, Martha handed Beck an axe. He stared at it. "You want me to chop wood?" "I want you to do something that makes your arms tired and your mind quiet," she said. "But you're not touching that pile until I show you how. You nick that blade, and I'll have you sharpening it till Easter." He nodded. It was a slow process. Beck was strong, but unused to proper tools. He'd been handed things before, knives, belts, ropes, but never taught to use them right. Martha corrected his grip, showed him the difference between splitting a log and splitting a knuckle. By noon, he was sweating and focused, and the pile of kindling was growing. Harris helped her in the garden. He didn't talk much, but she saw how he handled things carefully. Seeds, roots, dirt, as if they might vanish if pressed too hard. When he found a worm, he picked it up gently, set it aside, and kept digging. "Did you ever have a family?" he asked suddenly. "I did." "Where are they now?" "Gone." He didn't press, just nodded. Martha appreciated that. Some boys asked to wound. Others asked because they were looking for parts of themselves. Harris asked like he was trying to see how much loss he might survive. Inside, Milo was sweeping, not because anyone told him to, but because he liked making little lines on the floor. He sang to himself softly, old hymns without full verses, just fragments he remembered. "This little light of mine," he murmured, again and again, not seeming to realize she could hear. That afternoon, Martha found herself humming the same tune while baking. Beck's voice only cracked once, and when it did, he lifted his chin and repeated the word stronger. "Yes." When it was done, the clerk leaned back. "You're lucky," he said. "She could have left you to rot. Not many would take in 3 of you, not after what we've seen." "She didn't take us in," Beck said. The man blinked. "She didn't? We chose her." That night, when they returned home, there was a new drawing under Martha's pillow. It was of 4 stick figures, holding hands in front of a crooked little house with smoke from the chimney and stars overhead. On the roof, someone had written in big letters, "Found." And for the first time since burying her husband, Martha cried. She didn't do it in secret. She didn't hide her face. She sat at the table and wept. The boys didn't ask why. They just stayed with her. The first snow came early. It blew in quiet, thin at first, like lace pulled across the mountains. But by morning, the hills had vanished behind a blanket of white, and the sky hung low and gray. Martha stood on the porch in her shawl, breath rising in little clouds, watching the wind weave itself through the trees. Inside, the boys were bundled by the stove, sharing a single wool blanket between them like it was treasure. Milo had never seen snow before. He sat closest to the window, his mouth open in wonder, leaving little foggy patches on the glass. "Is it cold?" he asked. "Freezing," Beck said without looking up. "Can I touch it?" "You can touch it all you want. But don't go out there without boots, or your toes will snap off like brittle twigs." Milo laughed, but didn't move. Beck had a way of teasing that always walked the line between serious and ridiculous, and Milo was still too young to know when he was being warned or played. Martha smiled and turned back inside. "Breakfast," she called. "Hot biscuits, but only if you set the table right." Harris rose first, always the responsible one. Beck followed, stretching his long arms. Milo scampered to his place, his head still swiveling to the window, trying to catch every flake before it hit the ground. They ate in a silence that had stopped being uncomfortable weeks ago. It was a silence of understanding now, of warmth and chewing, and eyes meeting over mugs of tea. Martha found herself watching them longer than she meant to. "Why are you looking at us like that?" Beck asked, a biscuit halfway to his mouth. "I'm just proud," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. The boys paused. It was Milo who reached out and took her hand. He didn't say anything, just held it. That afternoon they built a snowman, not because anyone told them to, but because Milo insisted they had to try. "What name?" Months later, the tree they'd planted near the old mine bloomed. A small thing, fragile but growing. Milo was the first to notice. He burst through the front door barefoot, face streaked with mud, shouting so loud that Martha dropped the pie tin she was drying. "It's got flowers, real ones, white." Martha followed him to the edge of the field. The sapling had pushed through the hard frost and stood, barely shoulder high, covered in tiny blossoms. Beck knelt beside it, brushing a petal between calloused fingers. "Told you it would grow." Harris stood behind him, arms crossed. "You said it'd die in the first freeze." "Shut up," Martha laughed. That evening, the boys sat around the table while Martha made tea. The fire crackled low. The hound, a big solemn thing they'd taken in the month before, slept at Milo's feet. Outside, the wind moved through the pines like a slow hymn. "Martha," Milo said. "Hmm? Can I ask you something?" "Always." He looked down at his hands. "That lady I heard, the one who told me your name, do you know who she was?" Martha was quiet for a long time. She set down her mug, looked at the fire. "My daughter," she said softly. "She died the winter before my husband. She was small, younger than you are now. Her name was Ellie." The room went perfectly still. "She was kind," Martha whispered, "and warm." Milo's eyes filled. That's what she felt like. Martha reached across the table and took his hand. Then Harris's, then Beck's. "She sent you to me," Martha said. No one spoke for a long time. Then Beck, the boy who didn't cry, who watched doors and slept facing walls, who'd once asked her to hurt him quick if she was going to, lowered his head and let the tears come. They all did. Not from grief, not from fear, from something older and truer than both. From finally being found. Years passed. The house grew. More windows, bigger walls, laughter spilling from every room. Martha never turned anyone away. When word spread, and it did spread, that the widow Langley took in boys no one else wanted, they started arriving on their own, one at a time, sometimes two. Some came with bruises, some came with silence, but none stayed that way for long. Beck grew into a man who built fences and fixed things without being asked. Harris became the one who read to the younger boys at night, his voice steady and clear. And Milo, little Milo, who'd whispered her name the day they met, became the one who made everyone laugh, who drew pictures on every wall, who reminded them all why they were there. One evening, as the sun dropped below the ridge and the newest boy, a quiet child named Jonas, sat on the porch watching the stars come out, he looked up at Martha and asked the question they all asked eventually. "Are you my new family?" Martha didn't hesitate. "We're your real one." And in the distance, lightning rolled across the hills. But for once, no one was afraid of the storm. In time, people began calling the house by another name, the Langley Light, because that's what it became, a light. For the boys who were buried in cages and crates in silence, for the ones told they weren't worth keeping, for the ones who'd been digging their own graves until someone reached out and said, "You don't have to." And for a quiet, widowed woman who once lost everything, and then gave everything to give them life. If this story moved your heart, if it reminded you that even in the harshest winters, love can bloom where there was only cold, then this is the place for you. Subscribe for more tales of courage, quiet bravery, and love that defies time and circumstance. Every story is crafted to stay with you long after the last word. Subscribe now and never miss a heartbeat.